Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's session, which is all about our health and well-being as we transition back into the workplace. So, a little bit of information about me. I've done a couple of these webinars now, so I'm sure a few of you do recognize me. But for those who are new, my name is Natasha Simmons. I worked 10 years in property before I switched into my career to become a nutritionist. Given my time in my previous career, I really understand what it is like balancing pressures that come from working and also trying to balance other things around work as well, and just the pressures of being in a corporate environment, even if that is, being at home, which we all have been for the last year. And there are limitations at times being able to put ourselves first and our well-being first, and when we have other pressures to deal with. And that's why sessions like today are really good at helping you understand key changes that can really have a positive impact on your health and well-being, and changes that are easy to implement as well. So even, there is a lot to cover today, but even if you go away and make 1 to 2 changes over per week over the next few months, that and they start to become a way of life, that can make a huge difference to how you feel, your vibrancy, your energy, your mental resilience. And we'll look at those now, and it's just about picking what works for you, and it can be a bit of trial and error too. So I do split my time between being a nutritional therapist, specializing in corporate nutrition, but also running my own private practice as well. My email is natasha@superwellness.co.uk. If anyone wants to get in touch, if you have any questions, please do. And then we'll just crack on. So today is looking at concerns around our return to work, as I've just talked about, change and embracing change, what we've had to cope with so far, what might be in store ahead for us to have to deal with, building resilience, which comes up quite a lot with my clients actually, when they want to talk about feeling stronger within themselves, and not just from a nutrition point of view, but also lifestyle aspects to help them build resilience. That has definitely felt like a challenge, so to say, over the last year, with everyone dealing with so much following the pandemic. Social well-being is something that we're going to speak a lot about as well. And then we'll look at 10 super practical tips to support your return to work. And these tips are both nutrition and lifestyle and well-being based tips as well. So we'll look at those in more detail a little bit later on. So what are you most concerned about? So take a moment to think, what is your biggest challenge currently about going back to work? And this can include our uncertainty around COVID-19 and the protection that there will be at work and how that will be laid out, and how that will be communicated. Will our motivation be affected? Change, just dealing with the fact that we've had so much change this past year anyway, and now having to readjust to that. So potentially readjusting to our eating habits, which may change, because if we're going back to the office, we no longer have our kitchens just, right there to be able to access. We may not have the same shops available to us, or the same time to flexibility of time to be able to go to shops and pre-make our meals, for example. So our eating habits might be something that you are thinking about as you go back to work. Less availability for movement and exercise. So this is another readjustment which I'm definitely going to have to factor in. A lot of people have used that commute time in the mornings, a lot of my clients anyway, to get in their exercise, to go for a run, or to do a Zoom class, or to do just like a pre-recorded exercise class. And so they've really built that into their day. And we may not have that. We may need to readjust that as we go back to working in the offices and our times are just slightly changed. People may be worried about missing immediate family and adjustments there with pickups, etc. Logistics for traveling to work, those who may have to get on public transport, that could be a concern. And our concerns over health and immunity, which is a really big one, and we'll talk a little bit about that, and with the relaxation of rules, which are, fantastic that we're getting to that point, but at the same time, we do open more risk to being able to contract the virus if we are operating in a more relaxed manner. And that can be a concern for many people, especially with immunity and the fact that we're out and about and meeting more people, that our immune systems will be heightened because they will be dealing with more potential pathogens. And so there are things that we can do to support that, which we will look at a bit later on as well. So what's changed in 2020? Well, during the pandemic, a lot has changed for many of us. And the UK's Office for National Statistics revealed that working from home had increased from 5% of the workforce before the pandemic to 47% in April 2020. And that was just less than 2 months after the pandemic was declared. So in a survey run by the charity Working at Home, set up during the pandemic, they found that 54% of employees increased their working hours also during lockdown, which I've definitely seen for myself and other people. What has been established over many decades is that rather than emancipating the worker, technology frequently leads to an intensification of work instead. And that's kind of what we're seeing at the moment for many people. In April, the use of Zoom peaked at over 300 million daily participants, up from 10 million meeting participants in December 2019. So that's a big, big jump. It seems that the pressure on people working from home is worsened by this removal of the social aspects that we normally enjoyed with work, being able to interact with people in between doing our work and, having the flexibility to meet friends, family, whoever, colleagues, in and around work and outside of work. And that's definitely something that so many of us have missed and are craving, definitely myself anyway. So there's a huge amount of research into the positive side effects of the social aspects of our working environment. And so when we do go back, hopefully in time, we'll be able to rekindle these. And so there's huge positives to being able to get back into an environment that fosters that social interaction. So we find that the social aspect of work is part of a complex buffering system that creates a manageable ebb and flow during the working day. And so it's not just about going into work and doing your work. There's so much more to it from a social aspect that we thrive on as human beings. So another stat for you, it was found that 60% of new home workers had an overall increase in work demands during lockdown. So that's, as I've just said, I'm working harder and I know so many other people who are doing the same, and the demands are not just coming from work actually, but they're coming from other areas as well. Another survey found that 51% of people felt constantly under strain and 50% found this blurring between work and life. And this is something I do quite a lot with my clients at the moment, is to help separate that blurred line between work and life, and to help people distinguish so that they can, have they can make a space just for work, but then they can also have time just for themselves and their family and other areas of interest that they want to pursue. All of this, you can see from the stats, has put pressure on many of us and has potentially really impacted our resilience. And so let's talk a little bit about resilience. So your resilience is bigger than you think. And that's a really important point to start with, because there's a lot we can do, even though over time, throughout our lives, our mental and emotional resilience is put to the test, but we have the ability to bounce back. And that's what I really want to start with. So anyone who's out there and who is feeling the strain on their resilience of the last year, which I know there are many, and I have at times, there are things we can do to build our resilience back up. And they're not necessarily that hard. It's just having an understanding of what you can do. Things that don't tend to go as we'd hoped but also the many daily pressures we face, including the pandemic. This all contributes to affecting how resilient we are, so it just takes someone to have gone through a period of, a couple of years, for example, where they've struggled for, it could be a trauma, it could be stress from work, and that's just built up and chipped away at their resilience. And people can feel really flat after that, but actually there are things you can do. It just takes time to build that back up. And so the good news, as I have said, is that we do have this robustness. And resilience can be called grit. And there's so many ways of describing it, but it can be built upon, it can be cultivated. We've all experienced a huge change, adversity, and uncertainty this year. So it's important to give ourselves credit. And I think that we don't do that enough. Credit for what you've achieved by by getting through this, moving to the next challenge, dealing with things as they've come along. And it's also good to remember that for many, it will have had an impact on our strength and resilience and our ability to cope. Some people will have found it harder than others. Some people will want to go back to work. Some people may not, so everyone is dealing with different factors and variables that impact them. And we all have different things that we thrive on. So we're going to look at how we can boost our resilience shortly. So we'll talk about that. So consider what's been the biggest challenges for you in the past year. Just take time to think, what have been those challenges? It's important that we do have an understanding of what you have found challenging. How do you perceive your resilience levels? Like, have you checked in? Have you noticed that you're perhaps not handling stress as well as you might have done a little while ago? Or, has it been chipped away at? What are you doing to focus on building your own personal resilience? If anything, some people don't even realize that's something we can cultivate, but actually we can. And so, think about, are you doing anything that helps support that? And maybe if you haven't thought about it, it's, and that before, realize that you aren't feeling as strong as perhaps you once did, and then look at that and think, right, what can I do to change it? And let's look at the tips that I'll give you that you can then maybe employ to focus on building it. So just like, for example, an athlete, so they know that their performance is influenced by challenging themselves through effective training, the food they eat, allowing plenty of recovery time and quality in order to build the resilience so they can continue to perform at the level they need to. Well, it's not that dissimilar for us. So we've been through a lot in the last year, and in order to continue, we have to build and rebuild, really, and nourish ourselves so that we can develop that resilience and health back up again, so that we're on a good baseline. So research found that our ability to develop resilience makes a bigger impact than talent or intelligence, actually. So when it comes to our achievements in life, so when it comes to achievements, the stats show that intelligence only accounts for 30%, but our ability to develop resilience has a much bigger impact. So that's just really interesting to look at, and just goes to show it is an area that is worth focusing on. It also leads to greater satisfaction. So when your resilience is high, as a person, you are more satisfied, you are more fulfilled. And like I said before, it is a skill that we can cultivate. So there's a lot you can do. So boosting resilience, right? What are the areas that we can tackle to help us boost our resilience? So boosting our resilience is associated with improved physical health and well-being, a greater life satisfaction and longevity. Who would have thought boosting resilience can give us so many positive things, but it really can. And there are 4 particular areas that we look at with our clients to help boost resilience. So perspective is number 1, and that's putting a situation in a wider context. So we all have our own conditioning, and the way we view and approach situations can be very individual and often ingrained over many years of our own different experiences. Our mind tends to label things as good or bad, and it can be easy to default into worrying about certain situations without putting them into perspective or putting them into context. And many of us can just default to that worry, depending on what the situation is. So instead of defaulting, say, to worry in some situations, it's about asking yourself questions about that situation and its reality. So this is what perspective is. This is what putting things into a wider context. So questioning, how am I dealing with this? Questioning is, what is the context of my worry here? It really helps you form a more realistic view instead of making an assumption how you think you feel or how the situation's going to pan out. So you don't have to tackle situations alone either. So speaking and exploring a situation with others can really help gain perspective, reassurance, confidence, talking to managers about how you might feel going back to work, for example, professionals, family, friends, leaning in. And we're going to talk a lot more about social well-being, but that ties in our ability to interact with others and the benefits we get from doing that. So boosting our resilience is associated with awareness and changing our perspective. So when we notice that we are defaulting to, say, a more negative self-talk or worry, instead, it is about practicing a shift to a more positive state, such as optimism and openness or acceptance of an experience, whether it is good or bad, and just kind of putting it in a wider context to make it more manageable, as opposed to defaulting to, say, a worry or a negative thought. Slowing down is another really great way to gain perspective. So slowing yourself down helps you gain perspective, and it can make a huge difference. Think about questions such as, is the thought I am having helpful? Is the approach helpful? What is the wider context here, as I had said before? Engage with your thought. If it is, is it helpful for you? So is what I'm thinking actually doing me any good here? Great. If it is, great. But if it's not, then consider reframing it to make it more positive and more helpful for you. So that's perspective. Mindset is about viewing obstacles as an opportunity for growth, focusing more on progress. So don't see yourself as failing before you even begin. And that's what this is kind of all about. It's about acknowledging your progress, no matter how small. So this feeds into our brain's reward system, and we don't do this enough. We don't celebrate our small wins enough. But actually, when we do, it's really positive for us. It feeds into the brain's reward system, producing more dopamine. That's our focus reward neurotransmitter that keeps us boosted and elevated. It builds resilience to any setbacks as well. So give yourself a massive pat on the back. Give yourself a small pat on the back. It doesn't actually matter, but all our wins should be counted, no matter how big, how small. And I do find what works with my clients is writing down their wins at the end of the day, just having a note, a pen and paper by the bedside, writing them down before you go to bed. That is a really good way to shift mindset, to say, this is what I've done today. And you know what? It was positive. It doesn't matter how small it was, there were positives in there. And it allows you to kind of relax and sort of set yourself up for a good night's sleep, but also gives your mindset a positive spin. There are things we can't control, which we all know. And for example, we're in that at the moment with the pandemic. But embracing our ability to change what we can control is really important. So we can control how we react to a situation. And this is, again, talking more about mindset. And that, this can massively impact how positive an outcome is for us if we choose to react in a more positive way. And we practice this. The more we practice this, the more aware we are of when we're not practicing like a positive mindset, and we shift that, the more it will serve us. So it's just about catching ourselves on, having this awareness, and then turning that around. And the more we build that in every day, the more it will just become second nature. And that helps us build our resilience. Purpose. So another one is finding meaning and contributing to a greater good can be really important part of life satisfaction for many people. And that's something to think about too, because, I thrive off having a purpose, and I know that if I wasn't hitting that purpose, it would definitely impact my resilience over time. And many other people do feel the same. So look at what you can change to help feed your purpose, if you do need to change anything, and that can help boost resilience as well. And finally, relationships with colleagues, family, friends. So this is all to do with social well-being, and we'll talk more about this. But giving and asking for support from colleagues, family, friends is another important aspect, especially given the pandemic. Discussing with others how you and they feel about going back to work, and how they're going to manage that transition, how you feel about managing that transition, is really important. As a colleague, can you support other people if you're feeling strong and resilient? And in what way can you support them? As a manager, what do managers then need to do? If you're a manager, think about what you need to do to make this process manageable as we go back. So it's about cultivating these relationships, and we'll talk a bit more about that. But our social well-being is essential for a healthy, happy life, but we have all been forced to be less interactive. So it's such a shame that is, the way it has been for the last year. But now we can see a little bit of light, and it's our chance to start rebuilding our relationships, reaching out and making plans to see each other when in ways that we feel comfortable. So for our resilience to build, we need to practice all of these different areas and different ways to boost it. It doesn't happen overnight, especially if someone has felt things have been particularly hard. These things take time to rebuild again. But with time, you start to notice you're able to handle situations differently, and your perspective is stronger. So it is really important to look at these 4 areas and see what you can do to help cultivate that boost in resilience. So what is social well-being? Human beings are social creatures by nature. We not only crave interactions, we need them in order to thrive, such as regular, positive social contact with family, friends, neighbours, work, school. Social well-being has so many positives. It builds self-esteem, helps us manage stress, builds resilience, as we've just talked about, contributes to us living longer and healthier lives. So a few stats for you. Those who spend at least 6 hours socializing a day, I feel like that's an awful lot, but this is the statistic that was done. Those that spend at least 6 hours socializing a day experience a reduction in stress and worry, and consequently an increase in well-being. And so what they're talking about here is socializing is not just, going out with mates and spending 6 hours with them. We all have to work, but it's that social aspect within work as well. So that includes time within work and working on the phone, sending emails, all this interaction that's constantly, weaved in and out of our working day. All of that contributes to our social well-being. And a lot of that's been taken away from us, especially because we don't have that contact, that physical contact as well. And that makes a difference. So hopefully we will start to see positives when things change. Another stat is a strong support network can be very important for a successful life in all areas. So that's something else that they've seen in terms of having people around you who can support you. It can really help you thrive. And studies have shown that those with strong relationships are 50% less likely to die early, so die prematurely. And additionally, individuals with low social support were likely to have increased health consequences, including depression, decreased immune system, and higher blood pressure. So it does just go to show that this aspect of social well-being, whether we realize it or not, does have a real impact on us. And it is something that can be very easily neglected when we're so busy. So this is what makes social well-being an integral element of our overall well-being, all of these benefits. So even though, unfortunately, it can easily get neglected, as I said, because we're so busy, and we're in an area where we've been forced to remove it or significantly reduce it in lockdown, we are starting to be able to come out of that, and we are starting to be able to see actually there is a way for us to increase our social well-being, which is really, really positive. So let's just take a moment to think, how important do social relationships feel to your well-being personally? Some people it will be more important than others, but it is great to think about how it affects you. How would you rate your level of social well-being currently? I definitely know mine is not as high as it could be or should be. And that's something I'm really looking forward to cultivating the more and more we ease out of lockdown. But obviously within parameters that I'm comfortable with. And what does it mean at work? So at work, social well-being is really important, and I've touched on that a little bit, but it helps cultivate healthy, supportive relationships, friendships, and we're more productive and engaged if we have a good level of social well-being. We're more in touch with company values and corporate social responsibility. We feel more valued as a colleague, as an employee, and just as a person if we are more in touch with our social well-being and we have a good level of that at work. So it is really important. And these are all great positives that hopefully we will start to feel again as we move back into those environments. So let's look a bit more into planning for change. So what to consider as we find ourselves transitioning back into the workplace and different social environments. So, it's not just as simple as turning up. There will be anxieties for some people, and it is about really understanding what they can be and how you can plan for them in advance. And so let's start with knowing your environment. So know that your environment is safe is really important to lessen our anxieties. It's also important to speak to your employer if you have concerns. And there are many companies already who are planning and helping support people for this potential future transition. And that's really, really important. But if you have any concerns about that, it's important to bring those up with your employer. If you're new to the company, you might want to consider having a reinduction into the workplace because you may not have had that opportunity to even step into the office at all. And this is recommended by the CIPD. This is to help people feel connected and engaged. This could also help cover any health and safety changes in line with the government's COVID secure workplace guidelines too. So it's really important to make sure that if you're new, you understand the workplace, the environment and the guidelines, and a reinduction can help you do that. COVID-19 changes often make the workplace feel more sterile. That's what we're sort of seeing, and unfamiliar. So it's important to know what those changes are as well, and how that will change what your environment looks like. And it'll be a case of slowly getting used to that. Managing up. So this is another area to look at. Ask for what you need from your managers. So ask for what they need and sort of have that dialogue so that you can things can reasonably, there can be an ability to meet in the middle given the circumstances within the parameters of going back to work in a COVID environment. Be clear about your dates, your due dates to go back, priorities, expectations. Your boss may also be a little bit distracted, actually. I've had these conversations with a few workplaces because they're managing so much to do with COVID related issues. So make sure to understand that could be the case and to bring any questions you have to them if you think they've missed anything. It may not be because they had intentionally done that. It could be because they're distracted by managing many other things, and they might find what you're saying really helpful to help them re-engage and help them deal with certain things that they may have missed. Our commutes. So for many who are in London, especially, and outside of London, it can be very daunting. And on top of that, there will there will likely be a reduced capacity on transport for a while. So check what's happened to your usual journey when you are getting closer to going back, and ensure you can even make it on time. Just check what, plan ahead for that, so it doesn't add any additional stress, especially in the mornings. Stagger times are possible, so look at that. If you feel more comfortable with your employer, that could be something that's possible for you. There are many new bike lanes as well being considered in some areas, so check that that works for you. It might be that you prefer to cycle as opposed to getting on public transport. And consider how you used your commute time before. Was that a time for you just to rewind, allow yourself to focus before going into work? If that is the case, then try and reinstate that. Listen to a podcast, give yourself me time when you're commuting again, to try and just bring that familiarity back. Healthy habits. So for some, lockdown has helped build really healthy habits, and for others it has hindered it. And it's just, every situation is very different. Either way, we have lots of practical ideas, which we will talk about in a minute, to support you in the office, whether that is at home or at work. So we'll look at that. And we'll also look at habits to help build resilience as well. It's going to tie kind of everything in. Immunity. So we felt this is a really big one, I think, because it's been talked about so much over the past year. We felt much safer in lockdown, when we weren't seeing anyone, because we knew that, we were less likely to contract anything. And there's less of a need to build our immunity because we're not being exposed when we're keeping ourselves away. But as we go back, the increased need to support our immunity will go up, and to support our health as well. With or without the vaccine, we will be, we will need to make sure that we are protecting ourselves and others by taking basic steps to support our immunity. Unfortunately, as we have seen, the virus is likely to become an endemic, so it's important that we are aware of that. We are living in a world that is not the same as a year and a half ago. And we do have to continue to look after our health and immunity if we want to make sure that we protect ourselves from COVID, and we protect ourselves from how extreme COVID might affect us if we do contract it. And it's also important to be aware that some of us, as I touched on not that long ago, will be desperate to get back to the office. And others enjoyed being at home, and that is okay. Research is showing that where possible, companies are likely to be more supportive to those who want to continue to work from home, or maybe you could do some of both. So that is now becoming much more of an option to people, where it really wouldn't have been, especially when I used to work in an office, full time. The idea of working from home was just not really even considered. So this is something that's a big positive that's come out of, the pandemic, and something that will change the way we work. So if there's something you're worried about, definitely chat to your company, because there's nothing worse than feeling anxious when there is something that could be done about it. So do open that dialogue. So this is where we are now looking at some super practical tips, nutrition and well-being tips. So we want to look at nutrition and well-being from a resilience perspective. So building our resilience, staying healthy, boosting our immunity, supporting stress and anxiety. And there are 10 really good things that we work on with our clients in order to cover those bases. And the first one, and I'll talk you through all of them, and I'll give you the list, and then I'll talk you through each one. Breathing is really important. Checking in with regular movement and body breaks. Understanding what our plate should look like, our healthy plate, and why. Protein. Protein is so important for so many reasons that I will explain. Building our immune system. Food ideas, so breakfast ideas, lunch ideas when you're back in the office. Cheat foods. So, it's really hard to be fully restrictive on ourselves. So an 80-20 rule is just very normal and much more manageable. So sometimes we need to have a few cheat foods. It's best that you choose the right ones. So we'll look at those. the importance of batch cooking and the importance of sleep. So we're going to look at all of that. So let's start with our breath. Our breath can be a really powerful tool to help us regain focus. To help us think straight, to help us feel calmer and gain clarity. And I know a lot of people talk about meditation and breathing techniques now, so it's not something that is unheard of, but it's got so much science behind it and how it can really protect and build our resilience. Now, I practice breathing techniques every day, and I hugely rate it. I really have noticed a difference, and I don't do it for that long, but it has really helped with my strength and my resilience and just how I approach daily life. And what my stress threshold is much stronger when I practice certain things that help boost this resilience. So I practice, there are many things you can do. You can there are different types of meditation tools which you can look at. There are apps. Two apps that I've used before and that clients use are Insight Timer and Calm, and another one's Headspace. They're all really good. They're also brilliant for beginners. I do 4/7 breathing in the morning, and sometimes I only have 5 minutes. Sometimes I have 20. It just depends on, many different factors. But as long as I even do a couple of minutes, it makes a huge difference. So I do it in the morning and the evening. Now, 4/7 breathing is all about taking time just to sit, and you're concentrating on your breath. So you're breathing in for the count of 4 through your nose, and then you're breathing out through your mouth through the count of 7. And you're doing that for a couple of minutes, or you can do it 15 times, then have a break, and then another 15 times. And you do this in the morning and in the evening, which is what I do, or you can sporadically do it throughout the day. And it's really calming, it's restorative, it helps just bring your body out of our fight and flight stress mode and take us into a much more what is called our parasympathetic nervous system, which is what we need to be in to be able to build resilience, to stay calm, to allow our bodies to relax and do different jobs they need to. Because if our body is in stress, that it's in an alarm mode, and we need to bring it out of that. So practicing things like breathing techniques are brilliant. So that's one really great way. Sorry, I should move the slide there. And another good thing to do is just look at your breath count. So if you can slow your breath down to 8 breaths per minute is fantastic. If you notice that you're maybe more than 16, then that's where you would need to start practicing to slow it down and to breathe deeper. And concentrate on counting your breaths. So breathing in for 4, out for 7, that will really start to slow your breath down. And that's really, really good. So checking in, creating regular mind and body breaks throughout the day. I'm sure you've heard this so many times, especially because we're all working from home. We're all in the same environment. We forget to move and get up, but our body thrives on movement. We need to stretch. We need to move, just even go and get water or make an excuse to go downstairs, get out at lunchtime, have what my clients will do is have like a micro pause, take 2 minutes out to just go and stand outside in the garden or in the street. It doesn't matter, just to breathe in a bit of fresh air. And this is really important because our bodies are designed to move, so we need to include walking and brisk walking to allow that movement throughout the body. And there are significant physical and mental benefits from moving often. So just bringing that into every day is so important. It promotes our circulation of our natural killer cells. So this is all to do with our immune system. So movement can really help boost our immune system. It can promote circulation of our white blood cells. We need those to fight off pathogens and other immune system warriors. It can promote as well. And this helps the immune system work more efficiently and fight viruses. So movement isn't just about staying, physically healthy. It does so much more. It improves not only our immunity, but it improves our body's ability to regulate insulin. And if we're not regulating our insulin, if our cells are not sensitive to insulin, not sensitive to insulin, sorry, that can cause blood sugar fluctuations in the body, and that causes things like type 2 diabetes, and that can cause issues with cardiovascular health, stroke, all of these metabolic conditions. And so it's really important that we do get movement in our bodies for that reason. If I'm working with any clients or pre-diabetic or diabetic, movement would be something that is really, really important to get in to help regulate the insulin. So a 2011 study found that a sedentary lifestyle, e.g. jobs and hobbies sitting down, significantly increase the risk of symptoms such as depression, low mood. And so this is just another reason why movement is so important. And movement's great for creating more brain cells. There's just so many benefits to it. And it's great for weight as well, managing our weight too. So recent evidence from a population research study suggests that too much sitting is a major risk factor for lifestyle diseases, which is what I've just talked about. So obesity, diabetes, cardiovascular risk. And so there are so many benefits to moving. And just to recap, those are our immunity strength, insulin regulation, mood, energy, sleep, stress, anxiety, cognition, and the lifestyle diseases. So it really is great to just it doesn't matter how little you do, just keep building it in. So regular recharge moments, just to try and give you some ideas of what you can do to kind of bring this movement in. Build in extra walking or running. Check out if there are any new cycle paths. Listen to meditation or a relaxing podcast. And this is really to sort of help you restore your mind. On your lunch break, you can replenish by doing some breathing exercise, just getting outside and going for a walk, speaking to a colleague about walking or running together. I know whenever I was in the office, I used to go running with a colleague, and we would, love it. We would go running around the park for like 20 minutes. It didn't even have to be that long. But it was just a really good way to interact and to also stay fit. Journey home, and in the evening you can just relax and look at a magazine, rather than looking at your phone, rather than being stimulated constantly by being on screens. Ring a friend, a relative, listen to music, a podcast, or an audible book. All of these things are just really quick and easy ways to help bring in these moments of recharging our body. So number 3 is the healthy plate. So this shows the ideal balance plate. And this is kind of a rule of thumb. If you're ever unsure of what your plate should look like and portion sizes, this is kind of what you want to work towards. So we want to be getting these food groups in our diet every single meal. Half our plate, rule of thumb, half our plate should be veg. If we can get all those unprocessed colored veg in there, we are going to load our bodies with nutrients, and all of those nutrients are so vital, and that includes herbs and spices too, but they're vital to make things happen in our body, and that includes building and boosting resilience. We want to have a quarter of our plate to be protein, good quality protein rich foods, and we want to make sure that we've got the other quarter to be a balance between healthy fats and good quality carbohydrates. So not your white cereals, not your white pasta, but your quinoas, your sweet potatoes, brown rice. All of these options are really, really good. So think brown when it comes to carbohydrates and not white. And remember, your portion size is not half the plate. It's actually half the plate is veg, quarter of the plate is protein, and then the final quarter portion is split between fats and the carbohydrates. So we'll talk a bit more about protein in a minute, but making sure we have protein with every meal and good fats is really, really important. Fats are often vilified, and we're often going for low fat, low calorie foods. But actually, this can be really counterproductive, and this can make our bodies, our metabolisms much, much slower. And so we think that we're doing good by trying to like lose weight because that's healthy for us if we need to. But actually, that's giving your body a sign that it's in starvation mode because it's just not getting what it needs. And when it's in starvation mode, it shuts everything down, and that includes the ability to burn fat as well. And so often you can end up being really sluggish, and you can end up feeling more hungry. So there's a battle there, and you might end up putting on more weight, or it's just really hard to get the weight off. So really work to include olive oil, coconut oil, omega fats, avocado, butter into your diet. Now, if you are concerned or unsure, because this is obviously just a brief overview of what to do, speaking to a nutritionist is really important because they can guide you on exactly what your plate should look like. Aim for 5 to 10 portions of fruit and veg. So really here, you don't want any more than 2 portions of fruit a day, and make the rest veg. That's kind of what you're aiming for. With the veg, just load in as much color as you can. So the oranges, the yellows, the greens, the reds, the purples, even the beige, it doesn't matter as long as there's loads of color in there with veg and it comes from whole veg and not processed, then, your plate is on to a complete winner. And this type of plate and eating like this is a really good way to balance our blood sugars. And that's really important. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about that now. So protein, moving on from the healthy plate, protein is absolute king for helping us stay full, prevents blood sugar fluctuations. So if our blood sugars, if we are eating foods where there's too much sugar coming into the body, so say you're having a bowl of white cereal or lots of white toast for breakfast every day, or a white sandwich, you've got loads of sugar coming into the blood. The body's like, alarm mode, what do I do with this excess sugar? Because it's toxic to the body. Insulin will come along, take the excess sugar and go, right, it's okay, I'm going to store it as fat because this guy's probably going to run later, so he'll probably run it off. But actually we don't. We end up sitting at our desks for 8 hours. And so what happens is we go back down for lunch and dinner, and if we're having pasta again, the same amount of excess sugar gets stored even more as fat. And so you just end up building this fat tissue. And not only that, it can really impact these lifestyle diseases. Not only put on weight, it can affect our risk of stroke, diabetes, all of those diseases that I talked about, conditions that I talked about not that long ago. This is all impacted by having too many spikes in blood sugar, then drops. But if our blood sugar is balanced, and protein is vital to balance blood sugars, then we don't feel cravings as much. We don't get these like afternoon slumps. We feel like we have a more stable level of energy. We don't feel as tired. We feel we can concentrate more, focus more. Our energy is actually much higher. Our mood is a really big one here too. And our mood is much better when we're balancing our blood sugars. And naturally, we will lose weight and we will come down to a really healthy level for our body. So proteins are so important for that. It's also important for our immune system, for building, repairing muscle, supporting our liver, and importantly for our neurotransmitters. So when I talked about mood there, our neurotransmitters are chemical messengers from our brain to the rest of our body. And for example, there are 2 which really affect our mood, and that's serotonin and dopamine. So these neurotransmitters support our mood, our focus, making us feel good, making us feel like we thrive, our motivation. These are really important, and they must have protein, enough protein in our body to support a good amount of these. And that's why, protein really, for me and my clients, I always want to make sure that that's a good starting point to make sure they're getting that right, because that can contribute to so much, so many areas of health, including our psychological strength and our resilience. So a rule of thumb with protein is please try and have around 30 grams of protein per meal. If you want to be specific on how much protein you should have, it should roughly be 1.2 to 1.5 grams of protein per kilogram of your body weight. So if you are 70 kgs, you want to be having about 105 grams of protein spread throughout your day. The best thing to do is have protein with every meal and every snack. That's what you want to be doing. Ideally, to balance our blood sugars, we want to have our meal in the morning, then we should have a 4 to 5 hour break, have our lunch, 4 to 5 hour break, have our dinner, and then allow our body to rest for 12 hours with no food. So we're getting into a very slight fasting state, which is good for the body to restore and rejuvenate overnight. So just to kind of give you a really good idea, here's some pictures of sources of protein. So different sources of food have different amounts of protein in it. And often my clients will say, oh, how do I know how much protein I'm getting? And it's just about figuring it out over time or working with someone like me. So a fillet of chicken around 150 grams is going to give you 37 grams of protein. So that is brilliant. So if you're not veggie, going down the chicken route is great to get a good amount of protein in. As long as you make sure your chicken is organic and grass fed, because we don't want there to be too many hormones, etc. in the food, because that can affect our health in other ways. 2 eggs will have 12 grams of protein, so that's brilliant. Salmon fillet, 22 grams. Tuna, around 3 ounces of tuna, 24 grams. Plant protein such as broccoli. So a cup of broccoli is 5 grams of protein. That's actually really high for plant protein. 10 almonds, so roughly palm size, is 2.5 grams of protein. So it is easier to get protein from meat sources. However, there's loads of plant sources out there like tofu, tempeh, where you can get good amounts of proteins, beans, pulses, lentils. There's lots of options out there. Cheese, good quality cheese though. And yeah, tempeh, if I said, and tofu, those are all really good options of protein too. And so try and get those in if you're vegetarian. Just be aware it will be slightly harder to meet the amount of protein if you are plant-based. So just be careful that you're savvy if you are more plant-based or if you're vegan or vegetarian. So nourishing your immune system. So we've talked a little bit about this actually, and we'll continue to just labor the point because it is going to be really important. Our number one priority right now, as we've said, is to have a strong enough immune system to fight any infection that we might encounter. And good nutrition is really key for this actually. So it's important that we continue good through nutrition to help maintain a properly functioning immune system. So each forkful really counts, but don't feel like if you've had a one-off bad day that you've fallen off the bandwagon. It is not like that. 80-20 rule. If you are supporting your body 80% of the time, that 20% your body can cope because it's already stronger. So some key nutrients for strong immune system are protein, as we've talked about. Protein is key for a healthy immune system and is often overlooked by people. But now, hopefully, given that I've been banging on about it, you're going to really stand up and notice how important it is, and actually how much you really need. We need a bit more than people think. And so you can work out your own individual needs by following the rule that I said. Lack of protein can significantly weaken our immune system. It can weaken our antibodies, and our immune system does really rely on protein, especially when fighting viruses. So, like I said before, rule of thumb: aim for 30 grams of protein with every meal. Make sure it's good quality protein, and this includes, good quality includes everything I just said before, but also like oily fish. Oily fish is really good because it's got good amounts of omega-3 fats in there, which we really need for our body as well. Your protein needs to be grass-fed and organic where you can. Appreciate it's not possible for some people, but where you can, just think if you can do that. If you can't go organic with your veg, that's okay. A great rule of thumb is wash it well with a little bit of apple cider vinegar, wash your veg well, or peel the skin off, because that's going to hold most of the pesticides from the non-organic farming methods. You can also get some protein from beans, pulses, lentils, like I said, so I won't labor that point. Vitamin C, which is also really important to help the severity of viral infections and their symptoms. So diets rich in colorful veg and fruits can provide a huge amount of vitamin C. So, you know, you've got your red peppers, orange peppers, your berries, all of these colorful veg are brilliant for levels of vitamin C. Your lemon, squeeze some lemon over your salad. You know, that's just a great way of getting a vitamin C hit. Have some lemon and water. So let's move on to vitamin D. A large body of research shows that vitamin D can help reduce the growth of viruses and reduce upper respiratory infections. So sunshine is the best source, which I know so many of us already know that, but we just don't get enough here. So it's really good to consider supplementing, but to test first. Now, what I would say is speak to your GP. There are some really good ways of testing that you can do privately. The Better You home finger prick kit is about £30, and you get free vitamin D spray with that. That is brilliant. I've used that before with clients and it's super easy. Your GP can also test your vitamin D, so go and speak to them, and you can supplement then accordingly. Various researchers also touch on zinc. So zinc may be protective against many viruses and reduce the risk of lower respiratory infections. So good quality red meat is where you'll get zinc, shellfish, whole grains, egg yolks, green leafy veg, mushrooms, potatoes, nuts, seeds. These are all really good. So basically the balanced plate, if you just follow that rule of thumb, you're going to get a plethora of these different nutrients. So how can this look in practical, you know, every day? Well, it is the balance plate essentially. So we want to be having at least, you know, I really want to say try and aim for 10 portions if you can. So 8 portions of veg and 2 portions of fruit per day. And that can be, you know, frozen berries in a smoothie, or, you know, you can get overnight oats and add some berries on top there. Go for a green smoothie in the morning. Smoothies are a brilliant way to like load up the veg. What I would say with smoothies is people tend to try and go down the sweet route with smoothies, but half your vessel should be veg. And then you add your protein and you add your a little bit of fruit if you do want to sweeten it up, but like no more than say half a banana. I wouldn't add much more than that. Add your liquid, almond milk, oat milk, water, and that's a protein powder if you're going to go down that route. It's a good way to get a hit of protein. Other ways other ideas would be omelets, just to load up on your good nutrients, salads, getting in all the colors with the red onion, the beetroot, the red yellow peppers, some apples, broccoli, green leafy veg. And just sort of aim to follow that balance plate where you can, and try and get some nuts and seeds in there too, because they're a really good source of omega-3 fats, which are brilliant for our brain health and lowering inflammation in our body, which is actually really important because inflammation has been linked to COVID severity. So we want to try and dampen inflammation down in the body where it's become too chronic. So daily vitamin C, as we talked a bit about vitamin C, but let's just touch on it a wee bit more. We're going to touch on all of these just a little bit more because it can't be stored in the body. It's a water-soluble vitamin, so we need to consume it every day. It's really important for converting protein to adrenaline, and we need to do that. It's easy. It eases our anxiety and depression. It helps blood pressure, relaxing our muscles. It supports a good night's sleep and supports our immunity. So just look at the slide here and you can see again more options of veg that is loaded, fruit and veg that's loaded in vitamin C. Vitamin D, just to talk a little bit about this. So vitamin D itself, it behaves like a hormone. And hormones are so important because they make things happen in our body, and that's really vital. And immune cells have receptors for vitamin D. And so that means that these our immune cells can only work properly and fight pathogens if they have enough vitamin D. So in addition to these vitamin D receptors, immune cells also express the enzyme needed to convert vitamin D to its active form. So allowing this conversion of vitamin D within the immune system. So that, again, that's why vitamin D is so important. It is also important that we understand that we should get tested first, because it can be harmful if taken in excess. So the NHS recommendation is to play it safe. Do get tested first. And beware that there are some really cheap postal tests out there that may not give accurate results. So go to your GP first, and if not, look at companies like Better You, like Thriva, because they give good quality vitamin D tests. If you are supplementing, the best form is to supplement D3. So there are different forms of vitamin D. D3 is the most optimal form, and combine it with K2 because this is best for calcium balance, as vitamin D ensures our calcium absorption in the bone, whilst K2, vitamin K2, ensures calcium is integrated into the bones. And we really need to make sure that this happens. So that's really important. And these are just levels. So if you have been tested or you understand your levels, you kind of know where you are in terms of deficiency or optimal levels. So quick filling breakfasts. So here are some recipes which I will send on to make sure you have access to. And these are just really good ways of making sure you have a quick source and variety of different breakfasts. So what I would say is how you start your day is a really great indication of how you're going to end your day. And then the more we start our day in a really good fitting, the more benefits we're going to have, and we're going to build on that. So I always try and work on having a really good start to the day for my clients and for myself and my family too. So you can make overnight oats, which are so easy, and they can be done the night before. Always top something like that off with protein. Have enough protein, like a nut butter. Add some nuts, some seeds, chia seeds. Always try and add nuts and seeds to something like that, because we do need to make sure we're having enough protein with all of our meals, especially breakfast. Breakfast frittata. So this is basically an egg-based breakfast, which is amazing. And breakfast frittata muffins can be made in advance too. So, as we go back to work, we possibly won't have time to get up and make ourselves 2 boiled eggs, So we can do things the night before to plan, which are really, really important. And, a banana, chocolate and oat jar is another one that you can make in advance too, which can be a really good go-to, and actually a really good way. You can have that at any point in the day. So if you're just really craving something, then, go to something like that as opposed to a bar of chocolate. Other great breakfast ideas, like eggs are a winner. If you're vegan or you don't eat eggs, that's absolutely fine. Go for the overnight oats, or you can even do porridge in the morning, or you can make wholemeal pancakes. Now, the beauty here is you can make wholemeal pancakes, let them cool, and then cover them and separate them with parchment paper, cover them, and then put them in the freezer. You literally take them out, pop them in the toaster, they'll warm up, put your nut butter on top, your sprinkle of seeds, or have some yogurt with it, and maybe a few berries, and that can be a really great breakfast. And you can even just take that into work with you as well. I often eat my pancakes cold, actually, but yeah, freezing them, batch cooking them, freezing them is brilliant. And if you do need that snack, you can just whip them out of the freezer and pop them in the toaster, or take them with you to work and have them cold. So yeah, and also smoothies. I talked a bit about smoothies, but they can be a really great breakfast idea. What I do with smoothies is I will pre-prepare them. So I'll take like little sandwich bags, and I'll fill loads of veg, spinach, kale, broccoli, anything like that. And I'll make sure half of it is the veg. Then I'll add a couple of chopped up berries or bananas. I put those in. and I'll add some flax seeds, some nuts and seeds, and I'll just put them in bags and put them all along the in my freezer, and then just whip them out in the morning, and then add my liquid and put them in the blender, and then that's it. So easily done, so you're not even having to think about it. So I do recommend that. I am a big breakfast person, and I think that if we can really focus on our breakfast, it can make a huge difference to boost our resilience. So this is the same kind of thing with easy, healthy lunches. So there are salads here that you can prepare in advance, soup that you can prepare and freeze. So these are really good options too. Shortcuts. So, we don't always have time, and that's absolutely fair enough, or we just may not have the resources. And that's, once in a while, part of our 20% kind of rule, that's fair enough. Or there can be options that we can choose, if we aren't going to make our food, if we'd rather get our food out and about, make sure that we're getting choosing the right thing. So for breakfast, as I've said, porridge, full fat yogurt, the berries. You can go to Pret and places like that and get your eggs, get your spinach, tofu. There are options there. Always check the back of the packet, because we do not want any more sugar than, so 15 grams of sugar per 100 gram of product is absolute max, is an absolute max. Ideally, for something like a breakfast, we really don't want 5. So if we're looking at like ready-made porridge, make sure it's no more than 5 grams of sugar per 100 grams of food or of product, or as low as you can possibly get, because they often sneak in these like caramels, these maples, and that can really end up pushing our blood sugar balance up, and it can have a knock-on effect, and we end up craving by 11 o'clock anyway. So it isn't going to benefit us. Oat cakes are a great option. Dark chocolate instead of milk chocolate. Go for blueberries, berries, and pears, apples. These are all much better than exotic fruits, because exotic fruits are full of sugar. Don't have dried fruits, because they're also full of sugar. Go for ready-made falafels. They can be a great option. Buying your salad bags in advance. The bowls for lunch, the Sri Lankan sambar is actually a really nice one. Soups as well. Just check the packets, and tin sardines, mackerel. These things are brilliant. Yes, okay, in an ideal world we'd want it to be fresh, but these are really good options. They're full of great fats. They'll fill you up, they'll give you energy. So yeah, definitely an option. Preparation where possible. So, we've just talked about kind of shortcuts, and that's absolutely fine, but we really need to prep where we possibly can. So batch cooking, using food from the night before, making preparation fun and not a chore. So, set aside time 1 to 2 times a week to really prepare your food in advance. Listen to a podcast or music as you do it, so it's not a chore. Don't forget frozen foods, frozen veg, frozen fish, frozen fruit. They're packed full of nutrients, and they can be really easy to just grab from the freezer. Use online shopping. Like online shopping recipe boxes are a great way to encourage variety and give you more balanced meals, and often really fun to prepare. So just think about doing things like that. Prioritizing sleep's a really big one. Sleep has a significant effect on our immune health, our energy, our mood, our food choices. So, often when I run webinars, some people will say they get 5 hours of sleep. Some people will say they get 9 hours of sleep. Ideally, we want to be getting between 7 to 9 hours of sleep a day. Everyone's requirement of sleep is different, but what will give you an indication of whether you're getting enough is that we should be waking up feeling rested. If we're not waking up feeling rested, then we're not getting quite enough sleep or a quality of sleep that we need. And maybe there's things that we need to do to help support that. Routine is key. So we need to go to bed at the same time, get up at the same time every day, because our body thrives, our circadian rhythm thrives on that. Get enough daylight, because that signals to the circadian rhythm that it's daytime, and then that can prepare you for nighttime. And when you do come into night, remove things like screens for at least 2 hours before bed, because they emit blue light, and that can block melatonin, which is our sleep hormone. And we need that to get to sleep. We also need that to stay asleep. So that's really, really important. Having a good night's sleep can just really, really impact our mood, our anxiousness, our concentration. So, being able to prioritize it's really is something that we should just check in with. And also it affects our cravings too. So if there is a worry about weight, just check in to make sure you're getting enough sleep. If we aren't, it can impact our hunger hormones, and it can make us more hungry than actually we should be. And it can lower our satiety hormones. And so that in itself will mean that our body doesn't think that we're satiated. So we're going to crave even more food. So making sure the lights are dim. So using things like blackout blinds and eye masks are really important, because that stimulates the melatonin, and then that helps us get to sleep. Breathing. So like I said, I breathe in the morning. I do breathing techniques at night as well. Those are brilliant ways to kind of wind your body down and get you ready for bed. So these are just certain options that you can choose to help you prioritize sleep. So rethinking going to work. So it is going to take a bit of planning, because we will be changing the way we conduct ourselves. So look at swapping ingredients if needs be. So you're making the right choices. So oat cakes and hummus instead of crisps, dark chocolate instead of milk chocolate, overnight oats instead of cereal, nuts and apple as a snack instead of a shot bought granola bar. Look at what you can do to change your current eating habits, and that will require you to look at what you're eating at the moment. And it might take a few weeks when you go back to work to sort of adjust, and that's absolutely fine. Just bear in mind what we've talked about, or re-listen to the webinar, or get in touch on my email. So what is set to change in the future? Hybrid workforce. So platforms like Zoom are recommending that companies build their IT systems with a view to having to manage a mixed IT system, with employees working from home and some working from the office. And this is really, really important. So while this hybrid workforce creates flexibility and scalability, it presents a complex IT challenge that will require a more thoughtful approach. And so, it is great that we're able to tap into things like Zoom, and we're able to work from home more flexibly, but there will be an element of adjustment that happens as we do that. So we just need to be mindful that that type of change is going to continue. Employers will shift from managing the employee experience to managing the life experience of their employees. So the pandemic has given, business leaders increased visibility into personal lives of employees who have faced unprecedented personal and professional struggles over the last year. And this, according to one big survey by Gardner's in 2020, survey saw employers that support employees with their life experiences see a 23% increase in the number of employees reporting better mental health, 17% increased in their number of reporting improved physical health. There's also real benefit to employees who can see up to a 21% increase in the number of those who are performing even higher and compared to organizations that don't provide this support. So living with the virus, we also just need to be prepared that, we know that these rules and this change as we move out of lockdown, it's a continuation. It's not going to be something that happens overnight, especially as the vaccinations still are continuing to be rolled out. So we just need to bear that in mind. In January, more than 100 immunologists and infectious disease researchers and virologists working on the coronavirus, they found that they have said that it is unlikely to be eradicated, and almost 90% of them think that the coronavirus will become an endemic, meaning that it will continue to circulate in pockets of the global population for years to come. So being mindful of this and how we can conduct ourselves will continue to be super important. And that's just something that we that we should continue to think about. You know, there are positives. We're going to come out of this, and we have been able to move forward with the benefit of the vaccinations, but we'll be moving forward in a world that is not the same as a year and a half ago, you know, and we have to just learn to adjust to that. So how can managers support change? So providing positive work and sort of home environments. So allowing for time for exercise, recreation, having a pet, seeing children. So allowing more of a flexible approach, really, and more emotional and physical energy, that, you know, allowing this availability, really, to allow people to adjust and to feel like they're getting a balance between work and home is really, really important. Individuals may not want to make decisions straight away, and that's absolutely fair enough. This is all an adjustment, so we've got to be aware of that. What I think will make me anxious will be very different from what might make you anxious, and so we have to all adjust to that, be quite empathetic, not just from a management point of view, but just as employees, as teams working together, that some people might not react the same way as you. So, you know, tips for success include developing processes for virtual performance management. And that's what we have found with the research that we've done, that including regular team check-ins, one-to-one conversations, monthly reports to management will be really, really important. Working from home will boost energy, but will also deplete cooperation. So it's important that companies manage that. And such as BT, when we were doing a bit of research, we found that the BT team established satellite offices for people living in similar communities to come together occasionally, and that's worked really, really well. So, you know, that's a great way to deal with it, and it will just be an adjustment. So, for example, the team at Ericsson overcame certain challenges of virtual coordination by using like online participative platforms. Now, that sounds like, what is that? But it's basically the company were taking the courage to adjust, to try and experiment with getting things right for their employees. And that's likely to be what happens with every company. You know, people are just going to have to, people are going to have to like experiment so that we can work out, depending on the company and the company's needs, what people, you know, need in terms of the adjustment from a COVID environment, from a working from home only environment back into the office, and may it be hybrid or may it be all office. It just depends. So that is everything we have. There are lots of resources which I will send out so that you can tap into them, because there's an awful lot to cover today. I sped up a little bit at the end because I know there's only a certain length of time for these webinars. No matter what the individual challenges are, as you transition back to work and back into our social environments, we hope that this webinar was really helpful for you, and we wish you all the best for doing that. And we hope that these tips and ideas will help support that journey back in for you. Many thanks. And of course, feel free to rewatch this or email me if you have any questions. Okay.